Right now, at this very moment, the most powerful figure in the Middle East is a man whose face you have never seen and whose name you likely cannot pronounce. A man who has not uttered a single word in public since inheriting the most volatile position on the planet. His name is Mojtaba Khamenei, and he is the new supreme leader of Iran. But here is the catch: he is completely invisible. While the world watches American jets strike Iranian proxies and Israeli operatives move through the shadows, every Western pundit is shouting the same thing. They say Iran is paralyzed, that the regime is crumbling, that this new leader is a ghost who is too weak to show his face while his father's body is still cooling in the holy shrine of Mashhad. I am here to tell you that this narrative is dangerously wrong. The silence you are hearing is not the sound of a regime collapsing, it is the sound of a regime transforming. And if you can decode what that silence actually means, you will have a clearer picture of the next 10 years than every breaking news headline combined. I am Professor Jiang, and today we are going to decrypt the strategy of a leader the world has refused to see. I have spent months mapping the tectonic shifts that are reshaping our world heading toward 2030, and I have compiled all of that research into an exclusive analysis called The Next Global Shift. If you want to see where the power lines are actually moving, the link is waiting for you in the description and the pinned comment. Now, let's get into the mechanics of this transformation. We have to start with the context, because the timing here is everything. Ali Khamenei is dead. He was laid to rest at the Imam Reza Shrine, a location so sacred in Shia Islam that it serves as a direct link to the divine. This was not just a burial, it was a coronation of a saint. In the immediate aftermath, the Islamic Republic's infamously opaque machinery did exactly what it was designed to do. It elevated the second son, a figure who had spent decades weaving himself into the fabric of the Revolutionary Guard, the intelligence ministries, and the inner sanctum of the clergy. But the moment the crown was placed on his head, he vanished. No televised address, no rally, no photo op with the military brass. Total radio silence from the highest seat of power while the nation is effectively at war. Here is the trap that ensnares almost every analyst in Washington and London. In the Western political psyche, a leader who does not speak is a leader who is not in control. We are conditioned to believe that power demands visibility. The president steps to the podium, the prime minister addresses the parliament, the strong leader projects confidence to stabilize the markets and rally the populace. So when we see a new supreme leader who says nothing and shows nothing, our instincts yell, weakness. We see a man hiding because he is afraid. We see a leader with nothing to say because he has no authority. We see an absence because he does not actually hold the levers of power. But this instinct, I am telling you, is the single most expensive misinterpretation you can make when analyzing Iran, because Iran does not run on the software of Western visibility. It runs on an entirely different operating system, one that is ancient, sophisticated, and strategic. Let me explain what that operating system looks like. In the framework of Shia political theology, the highest form of authority is not the loud voice, it is the hidden hand. This is not a coincidence or a convenient excuse. This is the theological bedrock of the entire Islamic Republic. The central figure in Twelver Shia belief is the 12th Imam, the Mahdi, who according to doctrine did not die but entered a state of occultation over 1,000 years ago. He is the true and legitimate ruler of the world, governing from concealment. He is real, he is present, he is in absolute command, and he is utterly unseen. That is not a flaw in the system, that is the system itself. The most powerful authority in the universe, in the Shia worldview, is precisely the one you cannot see. So when a new supreme leader ascends in the middle of a war and immediately withdraws from the public eye, he is not signaling fear to his own people. He is stepping into the oldest and most revered symbolic role their entire civilization recognizes. Hiddenness is not a sign of weakness in Iran. Hiddenness is a sign of legitimacy. Now, let's pivot to something less mystical and more grounded in hard reality, because I don't want you to think this is purely about theology. There is a cold, ruthless security logic here that is just as critical. Consider what just happened to the Iranian leadership. The Israelis and Americans have spent the last decade perfecting the art of decapitation. They have eliminated commanders, scientists, and by the regime's own reckoning, they reached the top of the pyramid and killed the previous supreme leader. When your adversary has just proven that they can find and eliminate anyone who becomes visible, what is the most rational move for the new guy? He disappears. He doesn't give the enemy a schedule. He doesn't stand on a stage with known GPS coordinates. He doesn't become the next name on the kill list the moment he finishes the oath of office. This invisibility is not just theater, it is survival instinct. It is a man who watched his father die and drew the only sane conclusion: do not be where they can see you. And here is where it gets genuinely frightening. These two forces, the theological logic and the security logic, are not conflicting. They are converging perfectly. In most nations, a leader who hides for safety would look fragile and lose his grip. But in Iran, the leader who hides for safety gains legitimacy because hiddenness is holy. So Mojtaba Khamenei gets to be both safe and sacred simultaneously. He gets to be untouchable in the literal sense and untouchable in the symbolic sense. Do you see the sheer strength hiding inside what the headlines are dismissing as weakness? The West is looking at an empty podium and seeing a vacuum of power. Iran is looking at that same empty podium and seeing the silhouette of the hidden imam. These are not minor differences in interpretation. These are two completely different realities, and only one of them is going to be proven correct by the events of the next 12 months. So, let's ask the real question that nobody in the mainstream media seems to be asking. If the new supreme leader is silent, then who is actually speaking? Because power still has to be exercised. Troops still need orders. Missiles still need launch codes. Somebody is running this war, and this is where the invisibility reveals itself as a strategy, not just a symbol. When the man at the top says nothing, every commander, every bureaucrat, every factional leader below him has to guess what he wants. And in the absence of explicit commands, they act as if they already know his will. That does something very specific to the structure of the state. It pushes the initiative downward. It empowers the hardliners. Think about it. If you are a general in the Revolutionary Guard and the supreme leader has gone silent, you are not going to interpret that silence as a directive to negotiate a peace deal. You are going to interpret it as permission to escalate. Silence from the top in a wartime revolutionary state is not a brake pedal, it is a throttle. Every faction that wants to strike harder now gets to claim that this is precisely what the leader would want, and there is no visible leader there to contradict them. I want you to hold on to that thought because it is the crucial element that the mainstream coverage is completely missing. We keep hearing that mediators from Qatar, Pakistan, and Oman are flying into Tehran to de-escalate tensions. We keep hearing that Iran's president is on the phone with the Saudi crown prince trying to save the nuclear dialogue. That is all true, but look at who is doing that talking. The president, the diplomats, the visible side of the regime. And look at who is silent. The one man whose word actually overrides all of them. In the constitutional structure of the Islamic Republic, the president does not decide the strategic direction of the state. The supreme leader does. So we have a situation where the people publicly negotiating for peace do not have the final authority, and the person who has the final authority is saying nothing at all. That is not a country moving toward a deal. That is a country where the peace track is a smokescreen and the war track is accelerating in the dark. Let me make this concrete because I want you to see how this plays out on the ground. The Americans have declared the ceasefire dead. They've launched new strikes following Iranian naval activity in the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. Treasury has rammed the oil sanctions back into place, ripping up the waivers that allowed a trickle of Iranian crude to flow. So Iran is now being told two contradictory things at the exact same moment. The diplomats are saying, come back to the table, finish the JCPOA revival, and we'll ease the economic chokehold. But the reality on the ground is screaming, we just tore up the last agreement, we are reimposing the harshest sanctions, and we are bombing your allies. Now put yourself in the mind of an Iranian hardliner reading those two signals. Which one do you believe? You believe the bombs. You believe the sanctions. You conclude that negotiation is a trap designed to keep you talking while your enemy reloads. And the one man who could overrule you, who could say, no, we hold the line and pursue the deal, that man is invisible. His silence sounds a lot like a green light. Now, I want to address the nuclear question because it sits underneath all of this like a tectonic fault line. The IAEA inspectors are still locked out of the key enrichment sites that were previously bombed. Nobody outside of Iran's inner circle actually knows the current state of the program. Was the enriched uranium destroyed, or was it moved to deeper underground bunkers before the strikes? Are the centrifuges destroyed, or are they buried deeper than ever and spinning at speeds we can't verify? This is the single most important unknown in the entire crisis. And here is the terrifying part. It mirrors the leadership. Just like the new supreme leader, the nuclear program has gone invisible. And invisibility in both cases accomplishes the same objective. It denies your enemy targets. It denies your enemy intelligence. It denies your enemy the certainty needed to launch a decisive strike. You cannot bomb what you cannot find. You cannot pressure a man who will not appear. Iran has taken its two most valuable assets, its leader and its bomb program, and it has executed the exact same strategy with both. It has made them disappear. That is not chaos. That is a coherent doctrine. That is a nation that has studied the playbook of how it was hunted and has concluded that the ultimate defense against the hunter is to become unseeable. So, let me lay out precisely what I believe this invisible leader is actually telling the world, because that was the promise I made you at the top. Message number 1 is aimed squarely at Washington and Tel Aviv. It says, you cannot kill your way to victory here because we have removed the head from the target. You spent enormous intelligence assets trying to reach the top of our pyramid, and the moment you got there, the top of the pyramid dissolved into smoke. There is no single man to strike, no single stage to bomb, no single voice whose death ends the war. You are fighting a system that has learned to operate without a face. Message number 2 is aimed at the Gulf monarchies, at Saudi Arabia, at the UAE, at Qatar. It says, do not assume we are collapsing. Do not bet on our funeral, because a leader you cannot see is a leader you cannot count out. If you place your wager on the theory that Iran is leaderless and finished, and that theory is wrong, you will have backed the losing side of the most important geopolitical wager of this decade. Message number 3 is aimed inward, at Iran's own people and its fractious elite. It says, the guardianship continues, the line is unbroken, the revolution did not die in Mashhad, rally, do not scatter. And here is the part that should genuinely worry anyone hoping this conflict winds down. An invisible leader is almost impossible to negotiate with. Consider why diplomacy requires a decider. It requires someone who can sit across a table or send a trusted envoy and say the definitive words, this is the deal, I accept it, it is binding. When the ultimate authority is structurally hidden, no envoy can fully commit the state. Any agreement can be overruled by the silence emanating from above. The Americans could sign an agreement with Iran's president tomorrow morning, and it would be worth almost nothing, because the president is not the man who decides whether the missiles fly. The invisibility that protects the leader and sanctifies the leader also does one more thing. It makes a real peace deal structurally impossible. There is no visible hand to shake and no visible signature that closes the war. You cannot end a war with a ghost. Let me steal the other side of the argument for a moment, because I don't want you following the logic of power blindly. I want you following it honestly. There is a reading in which this really is weakness. It is possible Mojtaba Khamenei is hidden because his succession is contested. Perhaps the clerics in Qom have not fully blessed him, or the Revolutionary Guard commanders don't trust a leader who inherited power rather than earning it through years of battlefield command. In that reading, the silence isn't strategic genius. It's a leader who cannot yet command the loyalty he needs to speak. I will be honest with you, that reading is not impossible. A hereditary handoff in a state that officially claims to select its leader through a council of experts creates real friction. But here is why I still lean heavily in the other direction. Even if the succession is fragile, the smart play for a fragile leader is still silence. Because the moment he speaks and someone powerful ignores him, his weakness becomes public and permanent. Silence buys him time to consolidate. Silence allows him to negotiate with his own factions before he ever has to negotiate with the enemy. So whether he is genuinely strong or deeply fragile, the invisibility is the correct move. It is the strategy of a strong leader hiding to strike, and it is also the strategy of a weak leader hiding to survive. From the outside, we cannot yet tell which one we are dealing with. That uncertainty is not our advantage. It is Iran's. So, Where does this actually go? Let me give you the shape of the next phase as I read it. In the near term, expect the visible track and the invisible track to run simultaneously and contradict each other constantly. You will see diplomats fly into Tehran, and you will see strikes continue. You will hear talk of reviving the deal, and you will see the Strait of Hormuz stay dangerously volatile. Do not be confused by that contradiction. That confusion is the system working exactly as designed. One hand extended for negotiation, while the hidden hand keeps the war options fully loaded. In the medium term, watch for the first controlled appearance of the new supreme leader. When he finally does show himself, it will not be an accident, and it will not be routine. It will be chosen for maximum effect, likely at a shrine, in front of a mobilized crowd, timed to a moment when it converts his silence into overwhelming presence. That is the moment the message changes. And when it comes, you will know the consolidation phase is over and something new is beginning. In the long term, the deepest signal here is about how this entire conflict is mutating. We are watching the birth of a state that has learned to fight without a visible center. A state that hides its leader like it hides its uranium. A state that has turned invisibility itself into a weapon system. This makes Iran much harder to defeat than a normal country, and much harder to make peace with. Both of those realities point in the same grim direction. Here is what I want you to take away from this analysis. When the whole world tells you a leader is weak because he is silent, ask yourself whose logic you are using to judge him. If you use the West's logic, silence looks like fear. If you use Iran's own logic, silence looks like the hidden imam, the untouchable authority, the man who commands precisely because he cannot be seen. The dangerous mistake is not misreading one man. The dangerous mistake is reading an entire civilization through your own reflexes and then betting a war on it. The invisible supreme leader is not an absence. He is a signal, and the signal says the fight is not over. The deal is further away than the headlines pretend. And the people operating underneath that silence are being handed permission to escalate. If this changed the way you see what is happening in Iran right now, do me a favor and subscribe to Jiang Military Point. This is exactly the kind of strategic depth we track here, the meaning underneath the map, the message underneath the silence. And if you want my full breakdown of the economic and military shocks coming between now and 2030, the link to the ebook is waiting in the caption and the pinned comment. I will see you in the next analysis where we follow the logic of power wherever it actually leads.